All right, coming up on Finding Better, you don't want to miss this. We're going to talk about PTSD. And the whole idea of traumatic experiences happens to everybody. We're going to talk with Peggy Onlock, who's going to share her experiences of having gone through it, having identified it, and having survived and thrived through it. So, with that, this is going to apply to your life, and if not your life, to someone you know. So, please join us. Thanks. Hello, 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 and welcome back to our Finding Better podcast. My name is John Suzuki, and I am your host. And today we have a really interesting conversation with Peggy Onlock. And this is something that applies to everybody. And the whole idea is making your life better and learning from others. Because, sometimes the best way to success is to copy it, right? So we're going to talk about how to live better, how to live a better life after PTSD. Okay, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, what is it? The fact of the matter is, traumatic stress happens to everyone. It happens to all of us, right? PTSD is actually a mental condition that develops after an individual, experience or witness a traumatic event like exposure to death, a serious injury, sexual violence, or even really bad experiences at work or in your personal life, right? And it can really mess you up if you don't know what's going on and you don't get help. Peggy Onlock, welcome to our Finding Better podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much, John. It's really nice to be here today.
Yeah, now you wrote a book called Survive, Then Thrive. And your book is about your experience with PTSD, right? After decades of work in the financial services industry. As we move into this, what are my listeners going to learn from you in terms of what they can apply to their life for a better life?
I think one of the things I'd really like people to learn from my experience is everybody does have mental health, same as we have physical health.
Not me, not me. Heck no.
Sometimes
Yeah,
that health is
right.
good. Sometimes we have issues with it. So I
Absolutely.
think we have to come to the understanding that there is absolutely no shame in asking for help when we're suffering from whether it's PTSD, depression, anxiety. As you mentioned, we all experience it during our lifetime. Some
Right.
of us might not cope quite as well at the time. But if we
Yeah.
can just get professional help, same as we do from a medical doctor for physical health, from a psychologist or psychiatrist for mental health, we can get past those challenges that we have and we can live an absolutely wonderful life with them.
There you
So it's
go.
getting rid of some of the shame that's associated with it.
There,
So
it really is amazing, isn't it?
it is.
There is such a stigma around mental health conditions. And, I have very dear people, people who are very dear to me, very close to me, who have eating disorders, who have gambling issues, who have alcohol problems. And you know what? These are these are these are
Mhm.
clinically confirmed illnesses, and we're all learning more about it. In the case of PTSD, um, a lot of people kind of associate PTSD with the army and with people coming back from war, right? They used to call it shell shock, and
And I
now
was
we're
one of those people
you were,
for
and
the
so
longest time.
and the fact and the fact of the matter is it is very real for those people. But PTSD happens professionally in the workplace, right? I mean, there
Yes.
in today's world, there is so much stress and there's so much anxiety. And my wife retired from we both retired from many, many years of work in high tech. And I ended my career at Expedia. My wife ended her career at Microsoft, and she still suffers from waking up in the middle of the night with a cold sweat you know, and so it happens perfect. And that's why I'm so interested in hearing your story, is because, everybody works.
Yes,
So tell us a little bit about what happened with you.
a lot of my stress started when I was a young child, when I was around 6 or 7 years old.
Hmm.
I think I was on that path right from a very early childhood where
Hmm.
I learned to cope with stress in a way that people shouldn't have to cope with stress. I was molested as a child by a family acquaintance and in a religious setting. So it was very difficult for me.
Oh my gosh.
I did want to mention it was in a religious setting, but I did want to mention it if only I can add a component on there that if it affects not only your mental health, your physical health, but also your spiritual health. And that was probably the part of me that I had to work hardest to get back. I went for years and years and years with no obvious symptoms. I had a few years of teenage rebellion, like a lot of other kids do. And
Sure.
just so your listeners know, I'm in Canada, so I've been very influenced by the US as well, because a lot of the television we watch is the same. And a
Hmm.
lot of the news that we hear is very similar.
But you
So
guys don't put ice in your soda pop. So, I just don't get that.
some do, not all the time.
Okay, good. So,
Because of
all
my
right, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but
That's
yes, go
okay.
ahead.
And because of my work in financial services, I'm used to drinking everything at room temperature.
Okay, well, there you go.
Yeah, but it was a big impact. I was a history student as well before I started working in financial services. And over the years, this history had a huge impact on me. It still does. My father was a police officer, and I've got family who have served in the Canadian military. So
Hmm.
I've always had some type of structure behind me as well. I started working in the job. I often say it's because I was too lazy to go out and get a real job.
Okay.
So I worked in financial services, putting myself through university. And
There's going to be a lot of financial services folks out there going, wait a minute, we're not lazy. But
no,
that's okay. That's okay.
we are
Let's
definitely not
keep going.
lazy. And I'll get
Yeah.
to that in a minute too.
Okay.
I worked in the branches for about half of my career in financial services. So I dealt with the public. Canada has bank robbers as well. So I've gone through a couple of bank robberies over the years.
Wow.
Of course, that in itself is a type of trauma.
No doubt. No kidding. Yeah. Yeah.
In addition to the childhood trauma, I the survivor of a couple of assaults in the later years as well. So over the years, I dealt with those fairly well. People would think I was absolutely normal. I did well in the bank. I ended up quitting the bank for a while because I didn't want to work out in the branches anymore, but I went back into technology and operations and worked there for another probably 12, 13 years.
Okay.
So banking financial services it is a very demanding job because you're working with people's money. That's how they survive from day to day. And technology has changed so dramatically over the last number of decades that everything was a very fast pace.
Absolutely.
I ended up getting into a relationship as well at that time and living common law for a number of years. My spouse worked at the same organization as I did, and that started causing problems. My PTSD kicked in 1997 when I was going through a very difficult time at the bank. And it was also around the same time that we were working relentlessly on, I'm sure you've heard it in the States too, Y2K.
Of course. Now let me just pause real quick.
Yes.
Okay. So far, with the exception of your experience having been molested, um, uh, you've taken us from your childhood into your professional world and probably into, your I don't know, your 30s or 40s.
Yeah.
Um, and so far, like I said, with the exception of your early childhood experience, your life seems pretty normal. I mean, people go through tough times. I mean, I've never been robbed at a bank, but I've gone through. Everybody has gone through tough times and very stressful situations, and it strikes me that how relatively quote unquote normal, with the exception of a few experiences, your life has been, right? At least from my perspective.
And from my
And so,
perspective as well.
right. And
Yeah.
so, um, and so one day you're walking along and I guess your circumstances were very stressful at the time, but then something happened that triggered something, right? I mean, that's what it
Yes.
sounds like, that in 1997, something happened that that triggered your PTSD.
Yes.
And what was that?
For a number of years before that, because of my work and because of the issues I was having at home, my anxiety was increasing. So the anxiety was there before, but not the PTSD. So in 1997, I basically had a psychotic break at work. I had spent the previous year or two dealing with my ex common law spouse at home, constantly reminding me of the assaults from when I was younger.
Oh,
Whenever he was upset about something, he would remind me of those assaults and say that's why I was screwed up and didn't. He didn't use such nice words as that, though, but that's what he would tell me. So after decades and decades of me pushing those experiences to the back of my mind, they were now being brought to the forefront again. And I was remembering them every day. Now,
oh
at work,
no.
I was also going through a lot where the people were jealous of some of the positions that I held, even though we were at the same level, probably getting very similar pay. But they were jealous that I seemed to get along with the boss better than they did. So it was the constant reminder of he likes you better than I do. So I got at the point at work where I was afraid to go and talk to some of the people that I had to talk to perform my job because of some of the background noise that would happen and some of the rumors that were being talked about at the bank because
Okay.
they thought I got along better with my boss. And that got back to my former spouse as well. So you can imagine some of the challenges that caused at home as well. So
So
I think,
what then happened? You had this psychotic event.
yes, all of that happened to build up over the years, probably a couple of years when I look back at it now. I started having hallucinations. I would have really intrusive memories that came back at work. I was actually afraid that some of my previous assaulters would come to my place of employment.
Oh my gosh.
And I was trying to hide that from people so I could still do my job and still be able to have conversations, go to meetings. And by that time, I was doing some project management as well. So it was me that was supposed to be the one that was on a level keel and make sure that things got done as they had to in a technology area. So fortunately, I was on the business side of it. So it was actually the tech guys that had to do the real work and in financial services in such a competitive environment at the time as well.
So so
I
you're so you're living, so you're going through all this as you're having your psychotic event, right? As you're
yes,
as this has raised its head. Um, Now I've I've experienced panic attacks, anxiety attacks. Um, those things are not fun.
they're
And
nasty.
oh my gosh. And anybody who's gone through them, and I've come to realize that a lot of people go through those and
Yes.
they don't know what it is. They don't know why it's happening to them. I didn't. I couldn't control it. I'm like, what is wrong with you? What, you're a relatively smart guy, and but what's happening? And I learned later that there were things in my past that happened in my past that just kind of bubbled up to the surface without me knowing it. And it was really scary.
Yes, it was absolutely terrifying. Now, the actual psychotic break that I had to, we were implementing a big project on Thanksgiving weekend in Canada. So I was at work, and that made it worse because some of the people that were causing some of my issues were also there that weekend. And what basically happened is I was working. They probably thought everything was totally normal. And the next thing I remembered, I was leaned up against the wall with my head down. And one of the project managers from the actual implementation area came by and asked me if I was all right. Well, my response was, I think I should be in the hospital, because I didn't have a clue what was going on. And I was just so out of it really that I couldn't function anymore.
Now, physically, were you okay? I mean, physically, you were there. Physically, I mean, uh, you know, physically, were
Physic-
you healthy?
Physically, I was reasonably healthy, but the
Okay.
amount of anxiety I went through, I did end up going to the hospital that day. My
Yeah.
blood pressure was absolutely through the roof, and I couldn't function. I was having panic attack on top of that. So my breathing was affected as well. So I was all right physically per se, but I did have some physical responses as well to it.
Mm, wow. So how long were you in the hospital?
I went home the same day.
Okay. And then what I mean, did you realize as you were going through this what was happening and that it was PTSD?
No, I didn't. I
You
knew
had
there
no
was
idea.
something terribly wrong, but PTSD did not come to mind because,
Yeah,
like you mentioned previously, I have uncles who were in the military. I had heard of shell shock,
right.
and that's the only context I had heard of PTSD. So it didn't cross my mind until a couple of years later that that's what was affecting me. And I
So
think
how
that's partly because of my background with my uncles in the military, because I used to chat all the time. One of my uncles he did fight in World War II.
hmm
We used to chat all the time. He was a real macho man. He would never admit that he had any issues.
Of course not. That was part of the greatest generation for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But in retrospect, I could tell from what I was going through that he had also gone through the things, because I know from talking to my aunt as well that he has had a panic before.
sure.
And for years I thought, my goodness, that this can't be anything like it. But he and I always had a very close bond, and
Interesting.
he felt very comfortable talking to me. He didn't get into the gory details any more than my father got into the gory
Yeah,
details about
yeah,
his boxing
yeah,
career.
yeah.
But I think it was that background that made me think it could possibly be something like that. Although I didn't think it was possible because I have never been in combat. I've never been in the military, even though I have lived with
Right.
police officers and am very close to some military people as well.
So as you reflect back on your journey, right? There's a lot of folks out there who are experiencing panic attacks, anxiety attacks, or at some point in time they will.
Yes,
And,
yes,
for me, it would have been really nice as I was going through it, at least to know that it's okay. It's
yes,
okay. You're not going crazy. You're not going to die. This is something that is just, a natural course of events. Um, so what do you tell people? What do you tell people in terms of um, being able to, I guess, self-diagnose and know what they're experiencing?
One of the things I'm going to suggest is it's going to sound really silly, but people would ask me, what is it that I can do that will help you if you're feeling really anxious?
Yeah, yeah.
My response to them was, remind me to breathe. Because the first thing that happens when you start getting anxious is you start breathing faster. You start almost hyperventilating to the point where you feel like you're going to pass out. You get really
You know,
dizzy and everything.
you know what just happened to me? I mean, at this very moment, like 2 seconds ago, I felt when you said breathe, I breathed.
Yeah,
I sucked in air through my nose, and all of a sudden I felt relaxed because this
yes.
conversation is making me it's making me anxious, right?
It's
And
making me a
and
little anxious as
yeah,
well.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thank
Oh,
you for
that's
being
okay.
here. But I mean, I just experienced it
Yeah,
because as we're having this conversation, I just realized that I'm kind of knotted up inside a little
yeah,
bit,
you tense up.
and that and breathing, I mean, instantly helped. So
Yeah.
okay, so that's not silly.
No, that was number one for me, and it still
Okay,
is
good.
all these years
Yeah,
later.
breathe,
In
breathe.
fact, I just went out and bought myself a t-shirt that is multicolored. There's two words on it. Just breathe.
Just, I love that. I
So I
love that. You ought to trademark that. Just breathe. Wow. Okay. Okay. And that and going through that process will relax you. I just experienced it myself, folks. And if you're in your cars listening or wherever you are, try it right now. Just
a
breathe.
nice take a nice slow deep breath and it will automatically ground you a little bit. Now, if you're in your car driving, you can't do this next one, but it's something I do often at home. And it was also recommended by a professional that I've seen for years now, is just push your feet into the ground. And that also grounds you. I also push my
Literally.
hands, it does. And I push my hands onto my knees so it feels like my feet are even going further into the ground. And then I'll do some breathing exercises, and that will automatically make me start to calm down and realize that what I'm experiencing is just anxiety. I shouldn't say just anxiety because anxiety can be really difficult to manage,
Very difficult.
but it really does help you calm down to the point where you can get everything around you back to
At
reality
least
a little
yeah, at
bit.
least at least to where your head's not spinning so much, right?
Yes,
And
yeah,
at least to the point to where you can go, okay, what is happening? What is
yes.
happening? And at what point do you have a third, by the way? You talked about breathing, you talked about grounding,
And I'll go for a walk,
and you'll go
even
for
if
a walk.
even if it's just around my apartment. I'll go for a walk. If I'm feeling not too badly, I go for a walk somewhere in nature, and it really helps.
Okay. Okay. Now at what point can people know, oh my goodness, I think I need to get help. I think I need somebody to help me through this.
Well, I did get some help after the first time that I had the breakdown. My
Hmm.
psychologist called it a breakthrough. And I think it's at that point, that was several years after I ended up in the hospital. And there was one more episode where I ended up in the hospital again. It was just a number of months after the first time. And it was then that I started going to a psychiatrist. I went on
Okay.
medication for a while and I started going for counseling. But a few
Okay.
years after that, I started going to see a psychologist, and I actually went to see her for over 20 years until she retired, and we still keep in touch. So
And
that is how
she helped you through that.
she saved my life,
Wow.
because I
Wow.
literally would not have been here now if I hadn't gone for professional help. So
And folks, full transparency, neither of us are selling psychiatry or psychology services, right? We're just sharing this experience because
yes,
if you've gone through it or are in the process of going through it, or you find yourself in a panic attack, um, that this is kind of stuff I wish I knew.
yeah.
And yeah,
And I
and it
wish
happened.
I
So
knew it long
yeah.
before I did.
So your book is called Survive and Thrive.
Yeah, survive, then thrive,
Then thrive.
understanding post traumatic stress.
Okay. Okay. And after you've and during this process of first of all, you survived it. You
Yes.
identified it, you survived it, right? And then had a you went through psychiatry and you had your psychologist who you worked with. So describe what thriving means to you.
To me, thriving was, they had a very low bar for it, because surviving through post traumatic stress takes a horrendous amount of energy, a horrendous amount of self control. And I
Hmm.
was exhausted constantly because of what I was having to tell myself in order for me to survive post traumatic stress.
Hmm.
I basically relived. I never used to think the saying about people having their life flash before them before they die
Hmm.
was a good saying at all. But once I experienced post traumatic stress, that saying took on an entirely brand new meaning, because it was my previous life flashing before my eyes almost constantly, especially the bad things that you try and put out of your mind.
Oh, whoa.
It was absolutely exhausting. And there were years when I did not think I would survive it. But after years of treatment, I went through some of the similar treatments that they now use for PTSD as well. 1997, a lot of people didn't know about PTSD
Yeah,
other than in the
yeah. Right,
context of work.
right, right.
So, so
You
it
know,
was,
it's
yeah,
no, go ahead. It was
it
new,
was
right?
new for people to treat a non-military person for post-traumatic stress. In fact, I was never diagnosed with it for years after. And a lot of it is because my psychologist did not want to label me. And I thank her now for that, because I think at the time I was going through such turmoil in my mind. If she had have told me I had PTSD, I would have put that in the context as well, that I knew it as a younger person in a more combative
Right, right. In
atmosphere,
war, in war.
and I couldn't have survived it.
Wow,
It
wow.
was only
You know,
after when I learned more about PTSD that I asked her if that's what I had. She still would not label me and diagnose me with PTSD, but she said, I have been treating you for post traumatic stress disorder
wow,
symptoms. So, so that
wow.
was really
You
my
know,
diagnosis.
one thing that strikes me in your story is how much the external world and how many and how so many other people had a hand in in what you went through. You know,
Yeah.
people, your I mean, mean people suck. I say that all the time. They just do, right? But what strikes me is that, we talk about technology and certainly changes in the financial services industry, but you look around and the rise of social media has created all kinds of problems. It really is a double-edged sword. It's
Yes,
a wonderful thing from the standpoint of staying in touch with people, but boy, oh boy, does it suck. And does it bring out the worst in people, right?
it
And
sure
so
can.
I look at young people these days, especially those, I mean, my kids grew up with it. My kids were on Facebook when I didn't even know how to spell it. And I had no idea, the impact that social media was having on my kids and that generation of people. Now we're starting to understand it, right? And now there are folks out there that are saying, don't let cell phones into elementary schools, you know, and there's an awareness. But I look at what's been going on, and I gotta believe that there are so many young people out there and older people, adults, that are
Yes,
suffering from a kind of PTSD of just meanness, right? And just PTSD from people who actually want to do you harm.
yes, yeah.
I mean, are you do you feel that way too? That I mean, our world has changed so much. I mean, a big reason why I'm doing this podcast is to bring some sanity back into the world, right? And to let people understand things like what you and I are sharing, that
Yeah,
these things happen, and you know what? There are ways to address it.
yeah.
Um, But with the toxicity in the world today and the ease at which people can get to you, what
Yeah.
what do you is there anything that you can offer in terms of advice or
I think one of
just
the things, especially with technology and social media, it has separated us, but it's also brought us together a lot
yeah, yeah,
because people on social media, they're not looking at somebody right in the face. So it separates them from being mean. They don't feel like they're being mean because they can't see the person, they can't see the reactions. And
because the difference is that if that person was right in front of them, they would know that they're being mean. Is that what you're saying? But
they
since they're not in
probably
front of that person, they don't know.
Yeah, and they'd probably not do what they were doing in the first place because you're looking a person in the
Exactly.
eye thinking,
Right.
can I possibly be so mean to this person? Where the
Yeah.
technology brings us apart. Now, I
Yeah.
think in some cases, too, with technology, like Zoom, for example, we can see some of the reactions of people that we're talking
Sure.
to.
Sure.
So I think it has made us a little bit nicer online. And
Well, I
it's
mean, it's that double-edged sword I was talking
also,
about, right? In some ways, it's made things better, and a lot of ways, it's made things worse.
yes. And then there was also the anonymity of the technology where people were
Right.
thinking they're not even going to know who's saying this to them. So why not? I'm
Exactly.
going to say
Exactly.
exactly what I think. So I think
So
it's
what?
lost a lot of
So
the
how do
decency.
so how do people deal with that?
One of the things I don't do it myself because I'm not a really touchy feely person who likes sending happy faces and things like that. But one of the things I love on social media is I have a couple of friends who get up every morning, they sign into Facebook, and they put something very positive online for all of their friends to read. And I find that starts the day off nicely. It's
Yeah.
easy to pass along bad news and the things that we just want to get off our chest. But if we can make a point of having a good conversation with people and sending out some good news as well, that really puts us in, or it puts me in a different frame of mind where I know there is some positivity out there in the world rather than the bad news that you're hearing
I
over and
love
over and
that.
over again.
I love that. I love that. You know, the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. The same
Yes,
holds true, is that you put good things out there, good things are going to come back.
yes,
So, I mean, what you just said of start your morning of sending just send a quick note to somebody saying, "Hey, I'm just thinking about you. I hope you're having a
Yeah,
great day. I love you." You don't
yeah,
have to say the "I love you" part, right? But just know that I'm thinking about you and I appreciate you. I mean, if you sent that, you would change the world. If everybody started off their day sending out a nice email, just a nice email, not expecting anything back,
yeah.
but just you know what, Peggy, I just want to let you know I'm thinking about you and I appreciate you. Thank you
Yes,
for all you've done. I
yes,
mean, heck, that would be pretty cool. And not only would it be really cool for the person who's receiving it, it's cool for you, as you were
yes.
saying.
Person
Right?
sending it.
It just grounds your spirit. I love that. I love that, Peggy. And listen, we're getting to the end of our episode here. You have taken us through a lot. And one of the things I say is that nothing beats experience and nothing beats wisdom from experience. And you went through this, and this, your experience is not theory to you. And I love that we've had this conversation. I know this is going to help folks because there's folks out there who are listening right now
Mhm.
who have never experienced it, but someday when they do, they're
Yes,
going to remember this conversation, right?
yes,
And that's
absolutely.
that's so so awesome. So listen, how the name of your book again is Survive Then Thrive,
Yes. You
right?
have to get through the survive first, and then you can thrive.
Yes. And where can my audience get your book?
It is on Amazon. I've got hardcover, soft color cover, as well
Okay.
as an ebook, and it's also on Barnes and Noble. So it can be
Wonderful.
ordered. And I'm trying to keep the price down on it as well because I'd like as many people to read it. This is a
You bet.
labor of love. I
Yeah.
Writing was very therapeutic for me. It helped me, I think, as much as I hope it will help others in writing it down and being able to go back and read my own story and make some sense of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for you. Good for you.
The longest
And
time
and
it did not make sense at all.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Listen, thank you so much for writing your book. Thank you. My goodness, my goodness. Thank you for the outreach that you're doing, and sharing your experience. Because, like I said, that this is what it's all about. It's if people don't buy your book, okay, who cares, right? They've gotten value out of this conversation, and
Yes.
that's a big part of what we
Yes.
do. So with that, all right, Peggy, is there anything else you wanted to share?
Well, I'd just like to reiterate anybody out there who is listening,
Hmm.
know that you can get better. You can find a better yourself and get through some of the really serious stuff that you've been going through in the past because everybody has a really valid story to tell. I, for the longest time, did not think my story was worth telling. And it took a lot for me to write this book and share it with people and know that your story is every bit important as everybody else's. And you deserve a really good life as well, the same as every other human being on this planet. So take care of yourself and reach out for help if you need it, because help is certainly there and you deserve to live a good life.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And, folks, whether you're in a place to accept this or not, you are loved. You are
Yeah.
loved. I love you. And, and, you know, you deserve the life you want. And, this could be for some of you, this could be a big step in getting to that better life that you want and so deserve. So with that, Peggy, thank you again for joining me. Love to have you back sometime. And all of you out there, I love you. God bless you. Please share this. Please share this because this is going to help folks. And with that, we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thanks very much and goodbye, everyone.